In between playing Elden Ring for the 9 billionth time, I play video games, mostly ones with furries in them. And it's been a hot second since I made a video solely about them, so let me throw this at you. Here's 5 furry video games that I think are underrated. Starting with number 1, let's talk about this little game called Woah. This is going to sound weird, but I'm not even sure when I bought this game. It might have been in a bundle, it might not have, but I didn't ever play it until I decided to stream it. And I'm glad I did, because Woah is a bit like The Messenger if you know what that is. At first, the game is linear, following a furry Liam Neeson who's also a samurai, fighting a strange cult to get his child back. Admittedly, the platforming feels very nice as you move from left to right. It's only interrupted by small but very neat boss battles. It will shock you at first when like 20 minutes into the game you beat the last of the kidnappers and get your child back. But you only completed the prologue. Your kidnappers return with every member, but even they are shocked as the demon they were going to sacrifice your child to intervenes. Saved by a masked old man, Woah truly begins as the entire world opens up to you. Because Woah isn't a side-scrolling platformer, it's a Metroidvania, and a really damn good one. You run and jump, exploring every corner of the map you can find to get more abilities and thus explore even more. And the abilities you get are used super well, with the abilities not only being useful for combat but also traversal. This anime slash attack can be used to attack enemies and reach new heights, and your shirt can be used to kill and activate switches. Even though the graphics are minimal, the game does a good job of making the biomes feel different through color coding and high contrast. The game also has a huge, and I mean a huge, focus on boss fights. Sure, there are smaller enemies that you fight on the way, but those all go up in a puff of smoke. Not only do bosses stay when they die, but you even get to slap around their corpses afterwards, and when the bosses aren't dead, they are really good. They're super varied, with some using shields and others using super long swords. They even go beyond the standard humanoid enemies and into things like these Chozo statues and dragons. My favorite boss has to be this one on the bridge. Not only is the setting just a beautiful spot for a duel, but the boss itself is invisible unless you look in the water's reflection. The thing that really stands out to me most about this game is how minimal it is, and it does go beyond the graphics. There's not a single real bit of dialogue or text in the game. Everything about the plot is meant to be inferred from the cutscenes and music. It creates this fairly unique but also super likable experience that I'm rather fond of. The entire game just kind of makes you want to close your eyes and sink into it, just getting lost in the game's everything. It's a crime that I hadn't gotten to playing Woah earlier, but I'm glad that when I did, I got to doing it on stream. The game even has some neat options that unlock after beating it. Namely, the one-hit mode, where both you and every enemy die in one hit, but there's also no saving. Which may sound super hardcore, and quite frankly it kind of is, but the game is only 4 hours, so it's not that hard to throw yourself at. I know this is going to be more than a little ham-fisted, but why don't you like and subscribe while I move on to the next game? Fuuri's second most underrated furry game that you should play is called Nikoderiko, The Magical World. I had my eye on the game for a while and was just waiting to get my chance to snag it when it went on sale for this Christmas. Mostly because this game is best described as a Donkey Kong-like, but instead of playing as a copyright-free King Kong, you play as Nico or his sister Luna. These pair of treasure hunters, when looking for the next big score, find it in the magical world, but they also run into the evil Grimbald and his gang of cobras who end up stealing their bananas right from under our heroes' noses, thus beginning the duo's adventure to get it back. Wait, did I say bananas? I mean treasure. I recall a review of the game mentioning that it was light on new ideas, and to be frank, yeah, pretty much. Like, to a genuinely hilarious degree. If Donkey Kong is kind of sort of King Kong, then Nikoderiko is kind of sort of Donkey Kong Country. The influences are shameless, from the animal sidekicks to the map you use to go from level to level. The platforming even feels the same, to the point where it's a little disorientating at first. Like, for the first hour, it just felt really weird to be playing as the mongooses and not DK because they play the exact fucking same. There's also the side missions and collectible content, where instead of collecting the Kong letters, you spell out Nico. The game knows what it is and expects you to know what it is, that being a way to play Donkey Kong if you don't have a Switch. Or if you're like me, a way to play Donkey Kong without having to pay $60 for a game that came out in 2014, Nintendo! Okay, this is a side point, but genuinely, why the fuck is that game still $60? It came out over 15 years ago. It came out for the fucking Wii U, and these assholes are still charging full price for it. For God's sake, Nikoderiko came out in December 2024, and that game is only $30 at full price, and you can buy it on Steam, so it's gonna be on sale. I probably never would have bought Nikoderiko if Nintendo knew what sales were. My extremely justified, especially considering the whole Switch 2 debacle, why are games 90 fucking bucks, hatred for Nintendo's pricing aside, despite leaning heavily into its influences from Donkey Kong Country, the game does branch out a bit on its own by not being just 2D and incorporating 3D segments into its stages. It's a weird blend that ultimately works well to give the game variety without throwing cheap gimmicks at you. The closest thing to cheap gimmicks that the game gives you are the animal companions, which is yet another not-so-subtle rip from a certain monkey. Fun Fury fact, it took me like 6 takes just to say that line without saying donkey at the end of it. What's cool is that those collectibles you get aren't useless. They don't just buy figures for the gallery, but also the animal companions, which can use with quite a lot of freedom. I never really did that since I was just more used to controlling the game on foot, so if an animal wasn't necessary, I didn't want it. So I was mostly just collecting all those extra goodies for my own pleasure, which was fine because this game plays like Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong is fun. Aside from that, the game's music is stellar, which is unsurprising since they got David Wise on the game. He also did the music for the Donkey Kong games, which is yet another unsurprising similarity, but the thing that I like most about this game is that it's just so fucking gorgeous, like genuinely, look at this. The game is beyond beautiful to a genuinely frightening degree that's accentuated with a clever and stellar level design to incorporate shadows and such. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Nikoderiko. For what it's worth, I played this game on Steam Deck and it ran super well on the thing, like flawlessly, which I think does help me like the game more. That's also why you're only seeing 30 minutes of footage from the first 2 levels. That's all I played on desktop. I actually heard that the game runs kind of spotty on Switch, and with graphics like these, I don't doubt it. The next game I'd like to talk about is one that I've definitely mentioned before. I try to avoid mentioning games too much because there's only so much I can say about them, and you'd rather not watch me talk about the same 5 things. But given how this is a video for me to talk about the things that I think are underrated, I can't mention Threefold Recital since that game is sitting at overwhelmingly positive on Steam. So I can't really say the game is underrated, more like underplayed, so I'm going to have to go with the other option. One of the finalists for Furry Game of the Year, and that game in particular being Mercury Abbey. It's a plot-driven puzzle game all about the wolf Herod, a struggling writer who has to take care of his nephew Willie for a few days. At the recommendation of his editor, he decides to make a brief stay at the sanatorium Mercury Abbey, a place that's prized for a special drink called Sweet Dreams, a drink that ensures a good night's rest for every guest. But it doesn't take long for Herod and Willie to realize that something is off. What happened to the nymph family that used to own the manor that has now become the sanatorium? And what is the secret behind Sweet Dreams and the treasure of the Mercury Spring? That's what the game will have you figure out as you progress through the story, and the story is the highlight of the experience. The setting is this 1950s-esque world where magic exists, but it's supposed to be this distant thing that characters don't really know much about. Since the setting is limited to Mercury Abbey, a lot of it feels like a whodunit mystery where you're trying to figure out which of your fellow guests and even the sanatorium employees are shady. Could it be the jewelry salesman? Or maybe it's the filthy rich and twice as rude deer? Could the front desk lady be in on it? What about the bartender? And what's with the janitor that always spies on the guest? That type of story works well with the gameplay, that being a simple 2D side-scroller with a litany of puzzles thrown in to give you something to do. It combines these two facts well to create a lot of platforming puzzles where you have to navigate to the other side or collect the specific objects around the level to complete the puzzle. Although, if you don't want to solve puzzles, in the great adventure game tradition, there are a lot of tidbits and interactables in the background. These and all the people you can talk to fill out the impressive in-game journal, helping you really get a feel for the world. And that's what makes Mercury Abbey feel so alive despite the game only being around 15 hours long. The only real flaw the game has is a semi-spotty translation, but it was definitely not enough to ruin my enjoyment. That's why it was one of the finalists for my games of the year, and that's why it's an underrated game I recommend you play. The fourth game will be a major change of pace from the last few. Namely, that this one is still in early access, but it's real cheap, so I won't hold that against it. Its name is Trash of the Titans. It's a turn-based tactics game like the very mid Fire Emblem and very peak Devil Survivor. Your characters and your moves have a limited range, so it's all about placing your pieces in the right spot. The entire game is themed around trash animals, so like feral animals you find in urban environments. But of course, all of them in the entire world has a fantasy twist to it. We have the Possum Ranger, the Raccoon Rogue, the Badger Barbarian, the Skunk Wizard, and the Cat Necromancer, and the Squirrel Chicken Jockey. The game does a great job of making all these characters feel unique and distinct in their playstyles. The Raccoon Rogue, for example, really leans into the tactics genre by having him do extra damage when he backstabs, requiring you to really pay attention to where you put him. And the Necromancer can revive those she kills, giving you temporary new units. But what's cool about the game is what makes it unique. The trash. Because Trash of the Titans isn't just a turn-based tactics. It's a roguelike turn-based tactics. It's not just killing the enemies, it's also King of the Hill because you have to defend your trash. And each piece of trash preserved at the end of the level becomes your boons, to borrow a term from Hades, those temporary power-ups that change each run. Actually, calling them boons isn't that good of an idea because Trash of the Titans does have a thing called boons that the strong enemies drop. Be sure to collect them quick or an enemy will, turning into another problem you have to put down. But you don't just get the boons, you get them as a Tetris piece. Fun fact, Tetris blocks are officially called Tetraminos. They have to slot in for the bonus, and completing a row grants a party-wide stat boost. I had a lot of fun just managing my boons, granted that might just be because I'm a Tetris fiend. The game only has 2 acts out right now, with minimal story connecting them, so it's not like I can really talk too much about it. It won't take long for you to pretty much see everything the game has to offer, which isn't bad, but also not much. The fact that the game is only a little shy of $10 is the game's biggest selling point. For what it's worth, the game does run great on Steam Deck, which may be an abrupt way to end this segment on, but it's the way I'm ending it nonetheless. You may think my talk on Trash of the Titans was short, and short it may be, but I did that because I had to make time to talk about the final thing. A visual novel I've been streaming for the past couple of months called Tianhehui. Like most furry visual novels, you can get it for free on itch, but unlike other furry visual novels, this game is actually Chinese in origin. The game follows the wolf dog Tex, a rider from the western kingdom of Moro traveling to the eastern kingdom of Xi to further his knowledge of the world and his writing skills. Unfortunately, he truly seems to be hated by God because on the first day he nearly gets scammed twice and all his money gets stolen. The only reason he's saved from either of those situations is running into the White Wolf Bayou and the Tiger Tianhehui. But almost getting scammed and actually getting all of his money stolen is far from the worst thing to even happen to him on his first day in Xi. With the help of Tianhehui and Bayou, Tex does find a cheap inn to stay the night at, and it's run by a sweet mother and daughter. It's a little creepy, sure, but things get much worse when the inn is attacked by, well, ninjas. When I said Tex was hated by God, I bet you thought I was joking, but nope, he really is the world's unluckiest person. Thankfully, Tex is once again saved by Tianhehui and Bayou, and the three of them narrowly manage to save the day, evacuating all the guests before a fire can bring the entire inn down. But all is not well. Tex's most prized possession, a strange book, chained and locked, the last memento left to him from his deceased family, has been stolen. Thankfully, Tianhehui and Bayou have an idea. Hire them to get the book back. They work for an organization known as Tianhehui, title drop, which fulfills any job asked. But since Tex is a little broke boy, he can just work off the debt as a new member of the organization. I know I just spent like the last minute and a half explaining the plot and it probably made like no sense, but keep in mind this is the abridged version. I just summarized the first 12 hours of this game, so I skipped over a lot. And I know it really did sound weird as hell, but I think that's kind of my favorite thing about Tianhehui. One thing I always say is that audiences want interesting characters, not realistic ones. Realism is a good way to make them interesting, but it's not the only way. Think of Echo, how a lot of what makes it good is the fact that it's realistic. It takes those usual fantastic things like the obsessive boyfriend and then frames them in a realistic light, showing just how creepy that would be in real life. Tianhehui, on the other hand, is like the polar opposite. The setting is fantastical, the characters are weird, and the plot is crazy, and I love it so much. And the characters are just to die for. Tianhehui being this silly, childlike goofball, and Bayu being the metaphorical, but probably not literal, straight man of the group. But then there's also the rest of the members of Tianhehui. There's Kurno, a doctor who's also a prankster, Mojia, an ex-general turned the only responsible person in the entire organization. Then there's Salye, who is very pink and we like her, and Ru Feng, Tianhehui's terrifying big sister. These characters are just fun to watch, seeing them all bounce off each other. Like seeing Mojia find out about a roach infestation or the entire group fool around in the bath. The game isn't even afraid to make a stupid joke or ham-fisted JoJo's reference. But there's also more depth to these characters than one might think. It is a linear visual novel, but they do have choices that take you in different paths that all converge back to the main story. And it's these branching paths that often show you stuff about characters that you'd otherwise miss out on. You get to learn that Tianhehui is great with dealing with children, about Mojia's military past regarding a foolish soldier, and hints of what Ru Feng did before she joined Tianhehui. It makes them multifaceted and interesting that there's more to these characters and the world at large than the main plot will show you. It makes you want to really root for these characters because you see that they aren't tropes but good people. And that's what this visual novel is exceptionally good at, provoking sympathy. For all the game's comedy, you'll see time and time again just how fucked up the world can be. The best example I can think of is the tragedy of Ye Village. A story about a woman whose home is attacked by bandits only for her beauty to catch the eye of the bandit chief, who makes her the wife of the camp, the implication of that being clear. However, her beauty then attracts the eye of the eldest son of a noble family, who then kidnaps her and makes her his concubine. This pisses off the bandits, which causes violence to erupt and get the entire village and many people destroyed in the process. Tianhehui did help pick up the pieces and find a nice quiet place for the woman to live in peace, only for rumors to spread like wildfire as newspapers spread word of her, the source behind the Yi Village tragedy, and she eventually took her own life. And there's nothing you can do about it. This happened before the game began, before text was even in G. And that's the reoccurring theme of the visual novel, senseless, horrific wrongs happening to people and the powers that be unable or unwilling to do a damn thing. And that's why you care so much for Tex and the members of Tianhehui, because they seem to be the only people willing to stand up and do something about it. Whether it be Bayu and Shinyu helping Tex when he's getting scammed, or Tex himself putting down a grotesque demon beast that's yet another victim. I know this is going to be abrupt, but it's like 5 AM and this video needs to go live in like 7 hours, and I'm feeling pins and needles in my hand, so for my health, despite the fact that I could go on, I'm ending it here. Final thoughts on Tianhehui? It's really good. It's got plenty of CGs and the art's real nice. The translation is a bit flubbed, but it's a free game, so I'm not going to complain about it. I absolutely recommend you give this a try for yourself. Remember to like and subscribe, yada yada yada, you know how it goes. Patreon shoutout time. For 3 stars, we have special thanks to Tron, SkyKing64, 87 Werok, Galen Phasor, Chow Venomous, Riley Woom 78, The Good Old Days, and Jay Stassi. For 4 stars, we have McCoydes and Adelial, the Second Life Chefs. And for Super D-Tuper special 5-star shoutouts, we have Odari Lion, the Petrifying Exorcist. Thank you for watching, do be sure to like and subscribe. As always, this is your host Fuuri, signing out.